Well, faulty assumptions that individuals make during the planning process. Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, we talk a lot about the importance of planning. Of course, the answers and eventually the path that the individual is going to plan for is based on assumptions. And therein lies the problem. Faulty or unrealistic assumptions. My guest today is no stranger to the DFW area and has for many, many years written a personal finance column for the Dallas Morning News. Scott Burns is here today to talk about the importance of assumptions. Scott, welcome to Prudent Money. Well, Scott, before we get started, I was just curious because I remember going way back. How long have you been writing for the Dallas Morning News?
Oh, since 1981.
That's a long time. That's a lot of columns.
Well, I stopped writing for them when the Hearst purchase took place back in July.
Back at this past July?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So, it's a long time. It was probably long enough.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit before we get started. I want to get your opinion on the current state of economic health in our country. I mean, we're in a very odd situation where reporting stopped while the government was shut down. So there's some things we really don't know what the accurate, depending on how accurate they were to begin with, but we don't know what the accuracy of what's going on in the economy. We definitely are seeing some inflation. Not real sure about from a recession standpoint. But where do you think we are today, and what do you think 2026 looks like?
Well, I wish I could be more optimistic, but I have to be very cautious.
Yes.
For a number of reasons. One, you mentioned all the uncertainty, and basically we're flying blind. We have a president who willfully rejects people who give him information he doesn't want to receive, and who creates new uncertainties by the day and bypasses all the normal processes. So we are really flying blind. And I think that's changing people's behavior. We have people there have been multiple articles on people retrenching across the board. Catalina Yachts, for instance, the largest production boat producer, stopped production about a month ago. They have too much inventory. People are not, making the commitments that they need to make to keep the economy running. So, at the other end of the economy, there are lots of franchise fast food places that are closing shop and reducing the number of outlets, et cetera. So it's across the board.
And I know you've kept a close eye on this through many decades of your work. It's really there's a lot of, I don't know how to describe it, but there's so much weakness that's not being written about, it's not being reported on, but you can see it. And it's just unlike, I don't know, I don't want to be over dramatic about it, but it's just kind of unlike anything we've had in the past.
Exactly. It's as a calibration, it's off the scale. No.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how it comes about. But since we don't have the advantage of the crystal ball, we have to, of course, make educated guesses or assumptions about the numbers we use for retirement planning. What I've seen, and of course I know that you've seen this as well, it's so easy to get those assumptions wrong.
Again, yes, absolutely. People will just willfully make an assumption that serves their purpose, and they don't do anything in the context of actual data. So they walk into their own mistakes.
Yeah, I guess we could call it hopeful assumptions, maybe. But one assumption that you write about in your blog is the assumption that an individual makes that they're only going to live until age 75. Talk about why that could be a mistake.
Well, life expectancy, general life expectancy from birth is over 75. And if you happen to reach age 62 or 60 or even 55, you have a life expectancy that exceeds 75. And by the way, life expectancy is the average age at death from that particular point. So, it could be longer, it could be shorter. It's not a drop dead by date. So that's making very dangerous assumptions. If the person happens to have had a higher than average income, which is not a big demand, we're talking about having an income higher than, say, $80,000, they've got 5 years up on the people who are in less than that on average. So, it's just a very bad set of assumptions.
Yeah, one of the this, of course, this is a very, very important number that you get right, and that you allow for some leeway in that number. The problem, though, that, and I'm sure you agree with this, that you have, is you make the wrong assumption about a reasonable period of time that you assume you're going to be alive, then you get a lot of other of those assumptions wrong.
Yes, right. Yeah, we don't know the future. So at best, we're all making assumptions, and that's their worth is what they are. You're making your best guess.
Well, you mentioned in a recent blog a calculator that listeners could find very useful. And this is the Healthy Life Expectancy Calculator. Talk about what it will do for you as well as how to use it.
Oh, well, this is there are all kinds of life expectancy calculators on the web. Some with an enormous number of questions. This one is at the Goldenson Center for Actuarial Research at the University of Connecticut, and you answer 15 questions, all of which are very basic. Your age, your sex, some assessment of your health, and some other details. And it will project two numbers, your life expectancy in the absolute and your healthy life expectancy. And there is a difference. And how you answer those questions will determine how big a spread there is between your absolute life expectancy and the number of years of that you will live with significant disabilities. So, for instance, suppose somebody has yet to hear about the fact that smoking causes cancer and dozens of other maladies. That person, their life expectancy in the whole will be shorter, but their healthy life expectancy will be significantly shorter, so they can expect to live many years in ill health. One consequence of which is that they will have much higher medical expenses while they're being miserable and going broke.
What's interesting, Scott? I was just thinking about these calculators, and with today's technology, today's algorithms and calculations and actuarial tables, all of that information wrapped up in one, these calculators should be pretty accurate.
I think This one is, I think as they put in more details and try to slice the data more and more, you get to a point of diminishing returns where
right.
The data, there's too much variation and uncertainty in those results, and you don't know the sample they're drawing from, because the more questions you ask, probably the smaller the sample of people.
Well, talk a little bit, about expenses. Obviously, that's a very important number that you come up with, and you get pretty close, at least. How do you tell people to figure out your expenses, especially when you may be 10 years away from retirement?
What I personally rely on is the relationship of my promise-based income, that is, income from Social Security. I have a pension. I'm very lucky, because not very many people do, and or, say, a life annuity. That's your promise-based income. And if your expected expenses are covered by that, it really changes your way of looking at the rest of your assets. So I try to keep our core expenses, the stuff we feel we can't live without, within those two, the promise-based income. Everything else is basically gravy and goes for the things that we can cut back on if we have a need to.
Scott, that brings up a question, and there's people have diverse opinions about annuities, and the way I've looked at it is that there are some great programs out there, and there's some not so great programs out there. You got to be careful what you get. What are your feelings about the income producing annuities at retirement?
Well, they're generally negative, because I believe that deferring Social Security is the best annuity you can buy by deferring income. When I start looking at that stuff carefully, I tend to favor getting one that doesn't depend on your life expectancy. For instance, you can buy annuities that are basically term annuities where you say, all right, I want a 10-year payout. Basically, you're lending your money to an insurance company. Those tend to have better rates of return
right.
than the things that are based on the life tables. So you'll have a higher draw, and again, you're only dealing with probabilities here. If you have a 15-year payout, well, that can cover like 80% of the years you're likely to be alive, depending upon your age. For ancient me at 85, if I have a 15-year payout, my heirs would be receiving payments, most likely.
Sure. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. I do appreciate it. Personal finance columnist Scott Burns is here with me today. If you want more information, you want to go to a great website. Scott, I appreciate websites like that you've put together, because you could just go there and you can get so much great information and education. It's not costing you anything, which is great as well. You can go to scottburns.com, real easy to remember, and go check that out. This is a big one though, right here, Scott. And where I feel personally, get your opinion on it, where people are making some grave mistakes, and that is, you got to pick out a rate of growth that you're going to average. And I see people getting too aggressive with that number, basing it on the assumption, or a sample size of the last 10 years, which has been great, but that doesn't mean it's going to do the same thing in the future. How would you advise a person to pick a growth rate that is reasonable?
Uh, boy, that's that puts you in the center of a growing argument. Uh, uh, so let me give you a range there. First, the mistake of just based on recent returns is a gigantic mistake because
right.
they are historically so favorable. Recency is just not a good way of looking at things. I would take a relatively conservative estimate and project forward from there. I wouldn't, for instance, pick the 7% real growth of equities. I'd pick a lower number.
Right.
Right now, there's a lot of work being done that argues against the whole idea that equities always outperform bonds. Just let that sink in for a couple minutes.
Right.
Everyone alive has been through a period where basically equities have reliably outperformed bonds. Maybe not each and every year, but in most 10-year periods, if you've held stocks, you've done better than, say, Treasury bills, and maybe better than bonds a good percentage of the time. But there's, new research that goes back further than 1928, which is the starting period for most of this research. And it suggests, well, it's not such a good bet. Bonds are about even. So if that's the case, it starts making you think of something like Treasury inflation-protected securities, or at least being more fond of bonds than Wall Street would suggest. Wall Street is very big on suggesting that equities are good forever.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, what do you think about bonds today? I mean, it's been a long 4 or 5 years in the bond market, and my concern is, we talk about potential problems that we could be facing from an economic standpoint. I love your opinion on this. I've felt very strongly that wherever the next crisis lands, it's going to be a debt-driven bond market type event. What do you think?
I'm with you, Bob. I think it's all about debt. It's all about liquidity and measuring the ability of debtors to fulfill their promises for payments. And those debtors it's not just you and me with, if we have car loans, I mean, we don't, but there are lots of people out there who can't replace their car because they're already upside down on it. And it would be financially impossible for them. That's one of the reasons the used car market is so weird. And that repossessions are going up. So, I'm just not quite where to go with this, because I don't think there's a strong instruction or message in the statistics other than, be careful, reduce your obligations, and rely on the one thing that's seldom discussed by Wall Street and most of the people out there in the media, and that is, how adaptable are you? If you can answer that question quickly and positively, I have the ability to adapt to changing circumstances, then a lot of the number stuff becomes less relevant. Can I give you an example of adaptability?
Absolutely.
Years ago, I knew an executive who was suddenly removed from his company, and he went from having an essentially unlimited expense account to not having an expense account. And what amazed me about his behavior is that, in a way, he seemed almost relieved, and he adapted very quickly to living on an income that was maybe a quarter or less of the income he had enjoyed as the CEO of a company. And it impressed me a whole lot. I hadn't really thought about it. My God, how does somebody do this? The fact is, he just did. And he's an extreme example, but, people adapt. People are capable of change, and a lot of the planners are out there. They want to assume that we're totally rigid, that we can't abide any change at all.
Yes.
And in fact, people adapt extraordinarily well. Many do, not everyone. Some people are tragically impaired that way, but then can't adapt. But I think most people do.
I want to go back to something when you were talking about debt, that what a lot of people don't realize, in 1929, the huge stock market crash that went from 29 to 32, and then the Great Depression, that was all mainly about, of course, there's some tariff stuff in there, but that was mainly about debt and how it can get out of control. Of course, that's a totally different situation to a degree that we're in today, but it'll be interesting to see where this goes. I've got about 2 or 3 minutes left, and I really want to make sure that I cover a Social Security question with you. You were talking about Social Security. In fact, you mentioned this a while ago, how it made sense to wait. And there's so many, you see them, so many written articles and information that says, you should take it as early as possible and take advantage of it. It may not be here. It always has made sense to me, though, not to do that, because Social Security is so much better if you wait. Talk where you will land on that.
Let me let one of my favorite writers talk about that, because his name is Jason Zweig. He writes for the Wall Street Journal. He's definitely a very smart guy. He is an expert in behavioral economics. He worked closely with Daniel Kahneman. And he responded to a recent article in the Wall Street Journal promoting investing instead of deferring for Social Security. And he said, that's more than just an apples to oranges comparison. That's like comparing a roller coaster, investing in stocks, to an escalator, investing in delay of your Social Security benefits. Which would you rather ride? And most people would rather ride an escalator than a roller coaster.
Yes.
Even if they have strong stomachs. So, and what I've found over the years is that a lot of people, particularly statistics-loving engineers, they'll make big spreadsheets and show, well, if I invested my Social Security benefits, I would have more money than if I deferred. And they'll make the assumption of a 10% return on stocks. Well, the 10% return on stocks, what if you happen to be in one of the lowest 20% periods? You won't get that. What we're talking about is a stream of income that's going to affect how much you have to buy food. So you really don't want to be on a roller coaster for that particular calculation.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. Scott Burns is my guest today, and if you want more information about Scott, scottburns.com, great website, a lot of information. Scott, thanks so much for coming on, and we'll talk to you next month.
Thank you, Bob. It's been a pleasure as usual.
Well, if you have a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.